Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? We're going to call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Tuesday, January 7th, 2025. With that, I will call for roll, please.
Ms. Austin?
Here.
Mr. Montiel?
Here.
Mr. Ruddle?
Here.
Mr. Adams is absent. Ms. Hupka is absent. Mr. Martinez?
Present.
Mr. Renson?
Here.
Mr. Kaplan?
Here.
And Chair Haggerty.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from, that was a while ago. That was November 19th, back last year. So any discussion? With that, motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry, who was the second? Oh, thank you, Aaron. Okay. Ms. Austin?
Approved. Yes.
Mr. Montiel?
Aye.
Mr. Ruddle?
Aye.
Mr. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Renson?
Yes.
Mr. Kaplan?
Aye.
And Chair Haggerty.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the public forum. This is an opportunity for the public to address the commission regarding items that are not on today's agenda. So staff will not engage in dialogue or answer questions during this time. So if there's anybody who would like to discuss, and was this individual for the public forum? Or was this just to speak on behalf? That's for the public hearing. Okay. So anybody that would like to speak on topics not regarding the public hearing tonight? Okie doke. In that case, then we can move on to the public hearing. So we have case number ZON 2024-002 regarding 401 Inglewood Parkway, which has come before the Planning and Zoning Commission. And if we could have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Montiel?
Yes.
Mr. Ruddle?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Renson?
Yes.
Mr. Kaplan?
Aye.
And Chair Haggerty.
Aye.
And then if I may just state for the record that one of our commissioners, Stephen Ruddle, is online attending virtually.
Okay. And there was one other item that I wanted to bring up. In order to make sure that we don't have any potential conflicts of interest or perceived conflicts of interest, I wanted to note that I do work for the Mile High Flood District that has an active interest in some of the corridors in this area. And so I have some maybe background info that maybe the normal public wouldn't have. I have not, provided any insight or any input on this project itself, but I wanted to make sure that it was noted that within my normal career, I have a bit of a knowledge on some of these areas. So, with that, happy to answer questions or anything like that. And if not, we can move forward with staff presentation. So, thank you.
So what I'd like to do is anyone who's the applicant team, staff, or the public who is going to be addressing the commission, if everybody just stand and raise your right hand, those online as well, and I'm going to swear everybody in at once. Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that you will tell the truth in this proceeding before the Planning and Zoning Commission?
I do.
Thank you. And then I would ask when you come up to speak, please state your name and your either position or address.
Yeah. Will Charles, Planner 2 with the Community Development Department. As mentioned, this case tonight is for ZON 2024-002 for the Inglewood Plaza PUD. So currently on this site is the Hobby Lobby location. Right now it is, as you know, Hobby Lobby left the site in 2023, and it's currently occupied mostly by a car museum. The project address is at 401 Inglewood Parkway. The project size being about 6.2 acres. The current zoning on the property is a transit station area overlay, as well as the MUB1 or mixed use central business district. As mentioned, the request for tonight is to rezone the property from that MUB1 TSA overlay to a planned unit development. And the applicant team is Kimco Realty. So taking a bird's eye view of the property, as you can see, the property shares its zoning with properties to the south, west, and east of the property. In these directions, there are, large commercial and office buildings. There are also a few multifamily buildings like that picture 3 on the side. And then as well, large shopping centers such as Walmart to the west. To the north of the property, outside of that MUB1 TSA overlay, is majority R1C zone district with some R2B over there just to the northeast. As far as site history, for the majority of the time this structure has existed, it has been the Hobby Lobby site. So you can see from that 1993 over to 2024, there's been expansions kind of around it, but for the most part, this site has kind of remained the same. All right, getting into that TSA plan. So the TSA plan was adopted in April of 2022. On the TSA plan, you can kind of see that star there on those 2 maps to the right. So for the top one, it kind of explains what the vision for the TSA was. So those pink properties are envisioned for mixed use, so mix of residential and commercial. Those red, purely commercial, and then the brown, purely multifamily residential. So the PUD is keeping in line with what is shown on that plan. And then additionally, you can see that there on that bottom one, there's that 1/4 mile and 1/2 mile zones. So each of those different zones have different criteria for, maximum, minimum densities and things like that they would need to follow. So the TSA plan has a kind of a grand vision for the area. Primarily, it's things such as really activating the commercial spaces that exist and fostering new ones, including having larger densities in this area due to its relation to bus routes and the light rail, and really just fostering all of that engagement all the way from the light rail station down to downtown. All right, so getting into the actual project itself, this originally came in for a preliminary application meeting back in August of 23, and then another preliminary application meeting on February 13th of last year. It feels interesting to say that now already, but 2024 was last year. As far as neighborhood committee meetings, they held 2, so one on March 20th and then one on September 18th. And then a formal submittal of the PUD on April 9th. And then here we are at Planning and Zoning Commission on that January 7th. So the project proposes a 260 unit apartment structure with a minimum of 40 dwelling units per acre. And then additionally, on a future phase of the project, the intent is to have a hotel site with the additional option of adding residential in there if a hotel partner could not be secured by the applicant. So just kind of giving a backup plan if that doesn't work out. And I'll let the applicant kind of speak on that portion more when they have their presentation. But as far as the phase 1, it's projected to be a 4 to 5 story multi-unit residential apartment building along with a detached parking structure. They're currently on site, there's about 400 surface level parking spots. This would reduce it to 146 and then have the rest of the demand for parking for this site encompassed in that parking structure. And then additionally with the plan is an updated plaza space with landscaping. So you can see on the right the overall site plan for the property. So you have Floyd up to the north, Cherokee and Alani on the sides, and then a shared property line that goes down to Inglewood Parkway, with a small section of parking that is not owned by the applicant that would stay the same. You can also see on this that there is a 40-foot wide drainage easement that kind of runs diagonal northwest to southeast on the property. So right now, if you recall that Hobby Lobby site, it is directly on top of that easement. So with this application, there would be 30 additional feet, so 15 feet on either side of that easement, taking up approximately 1.1 acres of the site. As far as the left side of the screen is the development standards. So the main parts of it are these setbacks. So in the TSA and MEB1, it calls for these 5, no more than 15 setbacks. The applicant has taken kind of a similar but different approach, having these 0, no more than 5. So it kind of gets the same goal of pushing structures towards those property lines to really activate those edges. So it's a little bit different of a strategy for it, but it gets the same goal. Additionally, the maximum height was reduced from what's 100 in the TSA plan down to 70. And then the density, as mentioned in the main point of this PUD, is to remove that minimum 75 dwelling units per acre and to reduce it down to 40. And then I did also want to mention on this one, just in case anyone else is doing the same math I was about this drainage easement. So with it taking up that 1.1 acres, at full build out of this project, it would equal out pretty close to that 75 dwelling units per acre. But obviously, as far as a TSA plan goes, it doesn't envision a 1.1 acre easement on top of a property. So it actually does get it pretty close to that threshold. So this is just a snip from our Unified Development Code, just kind of showing what that frontage A looks like or what's envisioned for it. So really pushing it up towards those street frontages and really activating those edges. All right, so getting into the landscaping. So the PUD calls for basically meeting the Unified Development Code and TSA plan landscaping requirements. The TSA plan really, envisions a lot of, open communal spaces and plazas and streetscapes, really things to, promote walkability and, a communal atmosphere. And then as far as, what is shown in the plans, they're very similar numbers to what's in the plan. There are a couple of pieces that are, to be decided once it gets down into that building permit. But as mentioned, the PUD calls for landscaping to meet what's in the code. So there won't be any differences between what's in code or what's allowed on a use by right property and what's allowed on this planning and development. Getting into parking. So right now there is that building C, or that top one on this picture. That's envisioned as that parking garage, and you can kind of see centralized on the property is that surface level parking area. So the residential is envisioned for 1 parking space per unit, and then the hotel is at half a space per room. So the hotel is a little bit lower than what's currently in the TSA plan, and then the residential is matching what's in the TSA plan, so no difference on the residential. All right, getting into the elevations, so you can kind of see that west elevation, so that's if you were on Alati looking at the site. North elevation would be if you were in Floyd looking back at the site. And then east elevation being that Cherokee looking into the site. So getting into public improvements that are along with this project. Number 1 and 2 are kind of pushed off the screen, but just envision those a little bit further out. The applicant has agreed to do 2 speed cushions on those sections of Cherokee Street to help slow down traffic that's going through that area for any traffic that goes north. Additionally, there is a multimodal fee in lieu of $65,000. And then just to the south of the property on that shared access, a number of improvements for ADA and walkability reasons. And then additionally, that upgraded easement for the drainage. All right, so getting into support and opposition, the Inglewood Downtown Development Authority provided a letter of support, which should be in your packets. And then additionally, another letter of support came in for the applicant this morning. So you should have both of those. And then there were also 3 emails that we received with questions for the applicant as well as the commission, which should also be in your packet. And I can answer any questions on those, and also the applicant can provide input on those as well. All right. As for the recommendation, staff is recommending support of this PUD tonight. As you might notice, and we've kind of handed out this as well with this, the conditions have been kind of adjusted from what was in the staff report. The intent and the substance of it is the same. The main difference is just for clarity. So the anything that kind of referenced, a section of the staff report as meeting everything in this are now brought out to be explicit conditions where it kind of lists everything out. And I can kind of walk through those if you need me to. But the first one being, to meet any affordable housing standards that are approved by council. The next, or by council before any sort of permit submittal. The next one being those off-site traffic improvements, which I talked about on that other slide. And then the last one being to address any impact fees or open space fees that are required by code. And that is it for my presentation. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Any questions? I do have one, unless, no, you good?
I just wasn't sure when the appropriate time for questions would be versus do we let, have the rest of the presentation and then come back, or?
I'll be here all night, so
Yeah.
if you want to answer questions now or later, either one's fine.
There was one thing that the Downtown Development Authority had one additional request that doesn't seem to be a part of the conditions for the Greenway Trail to be included.
Yeah, so as far as, staff recommendations, we can recommend things that are a part of Title 16 or are, adjustments from things in Title 16, so that's why those aren't included. If there are things in there, you as commission have different abilities than we do as staff.
Thank you. And then maybe you can clarify, or I'm sure the applicant can as well. I was reading it wrong. Is the 146 parcel parking spots just the surface parking, and then they have additional garage parking? And what will that 146 serve then?
Yeah, I'll let the applicant kind of address how they envision that parking structure and surface lot.
Okay. All right. Oh, yeah, no.
Let me just go ahead and ask now. The 65,000 fee in lieu for the multimodal district,
Yeah.
what is that for? Does that go to just the general fund of the city, or is that earmarked for a specific purpose?
Yeah, and so, that's a good segue into me forgetting to mention that, not only does planning review these, but also we have, members from our fire, traffic, public works, utilities departments. So if a member of our public works department is here, I might defer that one to them as far as what that multimodal fund is earmarked for.
Thank you, Victor. And thank you, Will, for your presentation.
Yep.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Victor Rochelle, Director of Public Works. Thank you for the question. So what is the money allocated for, I believe was the question, and how would it be applied? So the city has several studies in the area, some specific to the corridor and immediately adjacent to this. So that money would be allocated to fund improvements, say, from the walk and wheel plan that are immediately adjacent to a project of this nature. So that would be the intent, to fund multimodal improvements.
And those would be above and beyond what is already approved as part of the city's budget. It wouldn't just offset things that were already approved to be built.
Yes, I mean, we would allocate and find a project, and then the funds would be used to build that project. They would not offset anything in the current 2025 budget.
Okay, thank you.
What is this fee in lieu of? What would the typical improvement required of a developer be in this situation?
I'll maybe pass it over in just a second, but it could be things, widened sidewalks, bike lanes, could be enhanced traffic signal detection to detect bikes at intersections. There's a number of things. Projects in the walk and wheel would include some of those same components. One of the reasons why we look to the fee in lieu is if the developer is doing it, typically it's only across their frontage. And so we end up piecemealing it, and the fee in lieu allows us to hold that money and do a complete project so we don't have these little fragments all over the city. Anything you want to?
Answered mine?
Okay.
Great, thank you, Victor. Okay, with that, I think we can go on to the applicant presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Claire Havelda. I am with the Brownstein, Hyatt, Farber, and Schreck Law Firm, and I, along with Nina Sawaya, are the legal counsel for your applicant team this evening, Kimco Realty. And I'm going to try and juggle the slides on two different laptops, so we'll see how well this goes. I am joined this evening by Mark Rickards of Kimco Realty, who you'll also hear during this presentation, Sky Stewart with the Pochner Company, Rick Peterson of Oz Architecture. Those will be the individuals speaking during the presentation this evening. We also have additional members of our team available for questions and answers at the end, should you have specific areas you'd like to dive into further. Before I get into the presentation this evening, I would just like to do a little bit of housekeeping. I always like to make sure I have a clean record. So I just want to be clear that I'd ask that at the end of this presentation, the slide deck, traffic report, basically the full application for this project, the new letter from Mr. David Carroll, the former DDA executive director, and the DDA letter do become part of the record this evening. So to give you an overview of what we'll be talking about this evening, obviously we've done introductions, we'll be talking about the site history, and really one of the key components for this project is going to be the community outreach. I think you'll find this applicant team has gone above and beyond to really listen to the community about what's appropriate on this site. And we'll go into the details of the project description. I will go over the criteria application so that you feel comfortable that we have met all of your code criteria by the end of this presentation. We'll do a conclusion and then be available for questions and answers. So as you saw, and I won't belabor the point, this is the site as it currently appears, just to orientate you. And it does have that significant single-family residence to the north, neighborhood to the north. So as staff mentioned, the current TSA overlay requires the 75 dwelling units per acre, but that did not take into account a site such as this where it is fully transected by a very large utility easement, drainage easement. So what we are here to do this evening is ask you for a recommendation of approval of a PUD with a lesser minimum dwelling unit per acre of about 40 per acre, which will allow us to support the 200 to 400 housing units on this site that have a smaller footprint than your typical single-family dwelling. We still meet the purposes and the intents of the TSA on the balance, and we take into account the neighborhood's wishes and desires with that. If the property were to be developed at that 75 DU, you would see that we would have to at least double the height of the building structures, and there would be no transition between that single-family residential neighborhood and this multifamily and commercial site. So what we're really doing is providing that transition area for your community. As a former assistant city attorney for both the cities of Fort Collins and Loveland, I understand that as decision makers talking about housing, you really have to view this as two sides of a coin. You have to really take into consideration the residents in the existing housing stock, and you have to take into consideration the future housing stock that you want to bring online. And I would posit to you that this project does a really nice job of striking harmony and balance between those two considerations. So with that, I'm going to hand it to Mark to discuss the site history.
Thank you, Claire. And, sorry, here we go. And Mr. Chair, members of the commission, my name is Mark Rickards. I'm with Kimco Realty. We're the applicant. I'm a director of development with Kimco, who is a real estate investment trust. We own and operate commercial shopping centers across the country, 17 of those here in Colorado. About 10 years ago or so, Kimco started looking at unique cases, unique shopping centers for opportunities or repositioning, whether that's multifamily or office or hotels or sometimes a mix thereof. In 2022, we learned that Hobby Lobby was leaving. So it was under that pretense as leasing was trying to find a replacement and realizing the grocery market was saturated, which is really our core model for shopping centers, grocery anchored shopping centers were possible. And if not, a chain like Hobby Lobby is great. I started looking at the context, and that includes the wellness district. It includes the Broadway downtown corridor, and it also included the city center effort. I attended the Design Charrette in 2023 and was super excited about those opportunities to the west, closer to transit, and we started looking at conceptual site plans. Those early conversations with staff and with community leaders, a large part of that conversation was about the drainage easement that bisects the site. So it couldn't be designed any worse. I mean, it's diagonal. It's diagonal through the project. It's an 18-foot wide by 12-foot tall box culvert, and it runs right under the existing buildings. Now, the drainage easement says that the city maintains it and repairs it, and owner has a right to build on top of it, but that's what the drainage easement says versus, various meetings with staff and agencies and also with the community. So what you're gonna see in front of you tonight really is our effort to look at what is possible if we avoided that drainage easement, right? And not just avoided it, but we offset it by another 15 feet on either side. Proud of the project, proud of the team, and I just wanted to say thank you to staff. They reviewed many concept plans, very patient with us, both planning and zoning and also public works, traffic, the entire list. So thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Skye to talk through some of the feedback we got during the public outreach.
Thanks so much, Mark. I'm Skye Stewart with the Pockner Company, 1480 Humboldt Street in Denver. Kimco worked really closely with the surrounding community when designing this site. We really utilize a model of concentric circles of outreach that focus on the most impacted, most adjacent neighbors first, and then broaden out into other community-wide organizations and stakeholders. So you'll see those concentric circles represented here with examples of the types of individuals and groups that we met with throughout the process. This timeline shows that outreach began over a year ago. You also heard that in Will's presentation. We started with initial conversations prior to making an application, and we've continued that outreach throughout the process. You'll see on this timeline 2 official community meetings, again, that Will noted, held in March and September, and that's in addition to the individual and small group meetings that we held along the way. Those community meetings were very well attended. We had approximately 40 attendees at the first meeting and 25 at the second. Our outreach also included conversations with the Downtown Development Authority leadership and board, leadership of the Inglewood Chamber, and the Cushing Park Neighborhood Association, which gave us a broader perspective and engagement and feedback going forward. We're really proud to have that support from the Downtown Development Authority board, and I believe Hillary Portell, the executive director of the DDA, is attending virtually if there should be any questions about our engagement with them. Through these outreach efforts, we really try to follow a model of what we call inclusive planning. That means listening to the feedback and really planning and making decisions about the site reflective of what we're hearing. In those neighborhood meetings, those larger community meetings, we primarily heard feedback focused on traffic, parking, and density, as noted here, and really worked to respond to those. You'll see many of the conditions that are proposed as responses to some of those conversations we had with the broader community. We really believe activation of this vacant site and providing new housing options and possible hotel were really well received in those meetings. And an additional focus from area residents on the existing challenges with traffic and parking allowed us to think through the conditions that you see before you tonight. Kimco has really worked to find the right balance of density on site and provide a transition to that single family neighborhood to the north and continue to manage those traffic and parking concerns. I will now turn it over to Rick Peterson to discuss the project in more detail.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Rick Peterson, principal with Oz Architecture in Denver. We're at 30th and Larimer Street, 3003 Larimer. This is about the 7th time you've seen this diagram, I think. It's pretty clear. Will really did a great job at describing all the parts and pieces. I'll maybe elaborate on a few of the kind of motivations and the opportunities that we're seeing. So this is a challenge, right, that's been described. The opportunities here, I think, are to really enhance this district as a walkable, pedestrian-focused with lots of connections and porosity by taking advantage of the easement, while at the same time creating that kind of streetscape that is the vision as well, as you can see, putting the buildings up towards the streets of Elati, Floyd, and Cherokee. These are the 3 pieces that you've seen before. I'll make a point that the parking, the existing, as was mentioned before, there's surface parking of about 146 spaces. The proposal here is that gets reduced about 40% to about 100 spaces. And then the balance of the parking is provided by a parking structure that's up against Floyd. And you'll see in a moment the kind of character that we're suggesting of that. On the ground plane here is really where the pedestrian connectivity happens, and you can see over half of the existing easement is redeveloped and for basically a very open, porous, semi-public parkway to promote this cross connectivity. And there'd be playgrounds and dog parks and such within, not a proper dog park, but dog area. This is an overview from the southeast that shows you the kind of scale and has been mentioned, the key here that you see is this kind of compatibility with the neighborhood at the 4 and 5 stories. The parking is proposed currently at a 4-story, and the balance, the other 2 buildings are at 5 stories. And then this is from Elati and Floyd from the opposite corner to give an indication of, this is a suggestion of the architectural quality that we are proposing. Again, this is This isn't the final answer. It's the indicative of what we'd be proposing. And you'll see a mix of both glazing and masonry and brick in a way that is broken down in mass and scale. The buildings typically, we would suggest, have a top floor that's treated slightly different than the others to bring down that scale and mass once more. I'm going to turn it back to Sky. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm turning it back to Claire.
So now that you kind of have the overall concept, I want to do kind of the meat and potatoes of the presentation and just make sure that by the end of this, we have a collective understanding that we do meet all the criteria in your code. So your code has some significant cross-references. So what this slide does is just show you everything, the overview of everything it is that we needed to meet. And so we'll walk through those one by one next. So the first criterion talks about furthering the purpose of your UDC by promoting the health, safety, and welfare of the community. And here, I think staff really summarized this better than I could when they talked about in the staff report that the project furthers the purposes of the UDC by better protecting vital infrastructure compared to the development that is present today, meaning expanding that easement and then also removing the building off the top of the easement. And then additionally, the creation of new housing in this area that would help bolster the economy, the economic vitality, and the surrounding city center area. So that's really, I think, the heart of what this project does. What we're really doing is providing homes in that missing market area that is so lacking throughout Colorado. So you have these, what we anticipate to be kind of the studio 1, 2, 3 bedroom apartments. So when you think about housing in Colorado, what you don't have are entry points into the housing market for the new college graduate, people just starting their careers, or folks that are looking to downsize and age in place and be able to have access to that public transit. So that's really what we're bringing online in the market here. The next criterion talks about consistency with your comprehensive plan. We feel like this is where the project, especially 3.1, where it really shines on capitalizing on the opportunities for redevelopment near that transit corridor. As you heard, the major anchor tenant, Hobby Lobby, left in 2023. And the market analysis we did shows that we have a unique opportunity here to really revitalize this area with investments in housing and hopefully bringing the hotel online. We also meet objective 3.2, 4.5, and the density. I think we meet the purpose and intents of the TSA by bringing 200 to 400 units online, even with that minimum density being reduced. The next criterion looks at, does this project support the intent of the proposed zone districts, including the thresholds of the base zone districts? As we've discussed, the density was carefully analyzed. We do support the housing plan. If you look at this project on balance with expanding the utility easement that bisects the property, the market analysis that's gone into it, really listening to the neighborhood feedback, we strongly believe that this supports the intents of this proposed, or of this zone district. And it's very compatible with the surrounding zoning of the MUB1. Our next criterion talks about the changes necessary for at least one of the following reasons, and we do believe that there has been a material change in character in this area with the anchor tenant leaving. And the market analysis we did really indicated that if it remained commercial the way it was, you'd be looking at Class C retail coming in, which is not sustainable or really in line with your revitalization goals. So that is why we're proposing to bring housing stock here, why we're proposing to bring the hotel and really work towards that revitalization goal. criterion 5, if I could stop skipping ahead of myself, talks about the new zoning not having negative impacts on the surrounding area. And truly, this is a revitalization project. I don't see negative impacts, given how much we have engaged the community and listened to the community, given the expansion of the easement and removing the building from the easement, and the traffic calming measures, which I think are extensive, that you'll see in criteria, or in condition number 2. And then finally, this should say criteria 6 through 8, but these are the PUD specific criteria. So again, we've talked about the public benefits with the easement expansion, but I really want to focus on the second criterion there that talks about how this deviation from the standard meets the objectives and intent of the code equally well or better, because I really think we do that. I think we now have a transition between the single family and this multifamily. We have the additional amenity, hopefully, of the hotel coming online, and we have the additional housing stock, and quite frankly, we're maintaining, if not increasing, property values in the area, which I think is important for the community. I do want to take just a moment to address the conditions of approval, and I want to first of all thank the City Attorney's Office and staff for working with us to wordsmith these in between the time that the original staff report came out and the additional supplement that you see in your packets. They were really lovely to work with. So condition number 1, I hope, emphasizes Kimco's commitment to affordable housing. So whatever has been adopted by your city council in terms of the Affordable Housing Task Force recommendations at the time that we come through to pull building permits, that's what we're going to be compliant with. Condition number 2 is really carefully drafted to really get into the nitty-gritty and the details of that, the traffic calming measures, the ADA, and that sort of thing. I do have to apologize. There was one condition criterion, which is under the ADA G, that I just want to put for your consideration that we may want to tweak a little. We are fully on board with the 8-foot sidewalks and redoing that. We don't own those sidewalks. So I would just ask that the condition reflect that we make best efforts to work with the owner to make that happen. And then condition number 3, that we are always happy to pay our impact fees. So with that, I would just simply request that, oops. Here we go. With that, I would respectfully request that the Planning Commission recommend approval of this PUD with the conditions as discussed. And we are happy and available to answer any questions or concerns that you may have.
Thank you very much for that information and presentation. Any questions for the applicants? Yeah, Aaron? Go ahead.
I just wanted to know a little bit more about the inability, or it sounds like there is an ability to build over the drainage, just what those decision points were and what just some more information about why that was not considered.
So I will kind of start with an answer, and then I'm going to hand it over to the engineers who really know what they're talking about. I think it is likely the city's preference that they not have a building over their easement, because when you talk about maintenance and access, that really hampers that. And then it was also the city's request to expand that a little bit. And we really felt that to be a good partner with the city, we wanted to honor that. But I'll bring my engineer or to say a little more.
Just briefly, while the drainage easement was written a long time ago, and it's kind of clear when you read it, right? And I don't know that they were thinking about redevelopment or any of that when they wrote it. It was, we just want to do this. Don't worry, you can build over top of it. When we've talked about, and Mr. Chair, you can speak to this more than me, but when we've talked about the box culvert, that's not just to our property, it's very far to the east and far to the west. It is it is a giant project that will ultimately need to be looked at. And the thought was to put a 5-story or 6-story building on top of it would be an impediment to whatever's chosen, whether that's to have several box culverts, whether that's to have that, rerouted, whether that's, there's a lot of options, but it's not, this property doesn't solve sort of that box culvert problem, right? But we didn't want to be a stumbling block to the future solution. Maybe that's a way to say it.
I've got a question about the existing parking lot to the south of your property. I realize that may not be your choice to what to do with that, but are there any thoughts on how that can be tied into the overall site plan? Because right now it seems like that's sort of cutting off your site from the obvious pedestrian corridor that would lead east and west to the light rail, lead to Broadway. Any thoughts there?
I agree, and that's why it was me that didn't realize part of the condition was that we're going to add the sidewalk. I want to add the sidewalk. I've tried to reach out to the intervening property owner for about a year and a half. I really haven't made headway. Inglewood Parkway becomes a really important pedestrian route, right? And the proximity to transit is a great thing. And I feel like this time of year, it's right at the edge of people walking over a quarter mile. But most of the year, it's absolutely something that we think is a big amenity to the site, right? And you can work in a lot of places and live here. The city would have to explain what the thought process was. I'm not sure if it included the Walmart parcel next door, but it used to be a right-of-way. It was abandoned. There is a lot of utilities still in it. And the parking lot was created to benefit the medical office. So in terms of opportunities, I mean, I agree. I just, there would be a lot of utility relocations to begin with, and then that parking, I think, at least on paper, serves a medical office, although I don't see a lot of people parking there.
Can we get clarification? Is that parcel, I think, owned by the city? Is that?
I've never quite understood. I don't know if it was abandoned and maybe it benefits the medical office building. I'm just not sure if it's owned by the city or by the property owner.
Yeah, it's not owned by the city. I believe it's owned by the same as the office building that's to the south of the property, as my understanding. It's kind of like overflow parking for that.
So this is outside of the Inglewood Development Authority that basically took over and has a land lease for the rest of the area. We're outside of that.
Yeah,
Parcel.
I'll look on our system and see what the property owner is, but it's not the city.
And there is one other parcel, that playground area is, just because we're talking out parcels here.
Yes, that is owned by the city. It is a playground for the Montessori school. Our understanding on that was that is city-owned property, and that it also had some former contamination issues. Certainly open to talking about that parcel, but we haven't, because of the proximity to the drainage easement, we haven't tried to add that into the design.
I think Eric.
My question is, what do you expect this, the property values for the R1C just north of it? How do you see this project affecting those property values of the single-family homes?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? Like, that single-family neighborhood, and we heard a lot from those folks at the neighborhood outreach. I didn't hear anyone saying they're worried about their property values going down. I don't know. I think the question in my mind is, what would be the difference in those properties between a 5-story building or a 10-story building, right? Like, then maybe with a 10-story building, the character of the neighborhood might start to change. But I really can't speak to, it having a specific influence on the value of those single-family homes.
And I think I made that reference, and what, in my mind, I was thinking of is if this site remains with no commercial tenants in there, and we kind of have a site that needs to be redeveloped and revitalized but isn't, and what that does to the surrounding property values versus bringing a project like this in. So I just want to clarify that.
Eric, I think a relevant point, if you think about like Second and Third Avenue in Cherry Creek, has that same step down, which benefits Third Avenue because of the solar angle. So I appreciate that the project's basically doing the same thing.
Another question I have is, you've talked about affordable housing. What do you anticipate rents to be for a studio 1, 2, or 3 bedroom unit?
I mean, that's a good question too. What we looked at in our market analysis was trying to look at both what the market needs were, which seemed to be studio 1s and 2s, but we want to include some 3-bedroom units. We haven't priced them. I don't have an asking rent. I think the reason for that is I'm trying not to look too far ahead, count my chickens. We've been at this a while. I really think the project is where it needs to be on the rezoning side. Assuming I can get past city council, my next step would be to find a joint venture partner, which is how Kimco likes to build these things, which will take some time. And then we'll get into more of a refined design development process. And that's when I would know what I think the market rents are. I can tell you, though, that the 4- and 5-story construction type means that we feel confident that we're going to be in line with the market rents in Inglewood, rather than Denver rents, which is kind of where we need to be if we had a 10-story building.
I just want to add to that, we know that your Affordable Housing Task Force just came out with recommendations, but they haven't yet been adopted by your city council. So we wanted to allow for that flexibility and not get out ahead of your city council.
And then the last question I have is, what type of hotel partners do you anticipate, talking to? Are you brand or type or whatever the case may be?
I'm glad you asked that. So it would need to be a national hotel chain, not someone who's never done it before or wants to do their first hotel. It would be a national hotel chain. The thought would be that and I've been an advocate for this because I have to stay 20 minutes away when I come to Inglewood, which has been a lot. The thought would be 100 to 120 foot, or 100 to 120 key or 120 room hotel. And it would need to be a national chain that has a brand. It would come in with a site plan with their architecture and branding and come through the process.
Thanks. Michelle?
Although this is something that's out of our control, do you anticipate charging for parking in the parking garage?
The anticipation would be, and I'm happy to talk through parking too. I think that was a question from earlier. The thought, so the first building would have 260 units. And I say that, and maybe it's 264, but at least 260 so that it meets our commitment to be at 40 units an acre. The structured parking has 360 parking spots, which is more than one per unit. And the thought is that if you rent, you get a parking space, and maybe there's some extra parking. That extra parking would either do one of two things. It would either be you could pay a monthly fee to have two parking spots. We don't want that to be used too much. If it's a hotel, we think the hotel employees should probably park in the parking structure. The surface parking really becomes, when you rent a unit, you like to pull right up to the leasing office and get the tour. So you'd have a prospective tenants area. You'd have surface parking that largely serves the hotel, but does serve both uses.
As you might imagine, I'm sure you've run into this before, but many of the projects that we've approved charge for parking, which in many cases makes the parking for the tenants on the street, which impacts the neighbors. And I was just curious about whether you're going to be charging or not. Like I said, it's out of our control, but to be a good neighbor to the R1C to the north, I think it's important to consider.
I agree with that. And we spent a lot of time trying to think about sort of the Goldilocks zone of parking, because There's a concern too about too much parking. We think we're there. I'm certainly happy to have more discussions with staff, but that was a reason to make sure we preserve some of that surface parking. So whether it's a hotel or more multifamily units, that no one has to spill over onto the street or neighboring properties.
I appreciate your thoughtfulness in this. Thank you.
Let me go in, could we dig into the parking just a little bit more, just to make sure I fully
Oh,
understand?
sure. I meant to run through the math. So if it's 360 spots in the parking garage,
Okay.
another 100, maybe a little more than 100, but we're trying to make it more of a parkway in the middle of the project. So if you say at least 100 spots in the middle, that's 460 spots. And at max, we're talking about 400 units. So 260 units with a hotel, right? Or up to 400 units, meaning that's at one space per unit plus a surplus for both guest and the extra, if it's 3 bedrooms, you should have 2 parking spaces. And we think in proximity to transit like it is, we think that's the right number.
And then to go back to the actual units, the 240, and so therefore the 40 dwelling units per acre is assuming nothing is in the hotel space at this point in time.
I wish hotel counted for density, it just doesn't count. So yeah, if it is a hotel, we would still be at the 40 units an acre.
Okay, and then if hotel doesn't come through, I think there was some discussion of it might transition to then more units if that was the case, in which
Right.
case that would then increase that density, because obviously
Correct.
what we don't want is something that doesn't actually activate the area, but also being mindful of the neighborhoods and things like that. So, okay, I think that helps me clarify, so thank you. Aaron, go ahead.
I had a question about any consideration for relocation or incorporating that early childhood education center that's currently there.
I did yes. In terms of, we did talk to the Montessori school, and from what I understand, she has a waiting list. One of the things that I want to talk about between Planning Commission and City Council is a couple of notes to add to the permitted use list, because I think that use should be on the list. And perhaps if we can find a way, she's going to need to find a new home while construction happens, and she may be happy there. At least that was the discussion. But I think that's a great idea if we can make that work. I need to add that to the PUD permitted list table.
And then some of the renderings, I think, show that parcel that's currently the playground for the ECE that's owned by the Renewal Authority, either re-landscaped or, I mean, what will really happen there?
I mean, that's a good question. I'm a guy who makes lists, but I have a very long-term list for this project, and that's one of them. Like, what happens to that, right? I think it's important, and I don't think it could support its own building. So happy to talk more about that.
Okay. One more thing. I just want to hear, well, connected. The transit station overlay, shooting for density here. This is we're within a half mile of the station there. Can you talk a little bit more specifically about the connections to the station?
Sure.
And also connected to that, I really appreciate the massing on the north side that's respective of the R1 neighborhoods. What about some increased density on the south side facing the commercial?
And I'm not an architect, so I may need Rick to come up and talk about building types, but let me talk in generalities. We think Inglewood Parkway is the right conduit on the pedestrian side. One of the things that we've looked at and think is really on the right track is the bike route long-term plans. So along Cherokee and down Floyd, we think that's a natural corridor. Floyd's being used today. Can make some connections through there. And on the pedestrian side, I really see Inglewood Parkway as the natural east-west corridor in terms of lighting and in terms of with the sidewalk and in terms of when City Center comes into being a visual focal point on where I'm going, right? I think that makes the most sense.
No, and then Eric.
If I could go back to parking again. Would you have made any different decisions about that interior surface parking lot absent the one space per unit requirement?
That's a complicated question. So I wish we didn't have parking requirements, and I guess that's how I'll start. Because I think owners and developers don't want to get it wrong. And on a pragmatic side, we think the right number is one space per unit. We also want to provide a little more than one space per unit. And that allows for flexibility, it allows for charging stations, it allows for ADA spaces, and allows for that one guy who, seems to always have, two of the guest spots locked up, So I can tell you that I didn't feel constrained by the code. I wanted to get it right, and it was hard for me to understand how much people rely on the transit station and not have a car. That was the hard part for me.
Do you think there's an opportunity to, you described the possibility of a parkway concept with that parking lot. Can you tell me a little bit more about what
I
that
just meant
looks
if you
like?
look at, and we could pull this back up, I could find it. But I just meant that, what do you do with a drainage easement that could be ripped up, right, for maintenance? And I think green space, there's gonna be some trees and hopefully those can stay. But for the parking lot, I don't know that our existing parking lot has one tree in it, right? And it's maximized for efficiencies. And I think my point with that was, I think the surface parking lot, it's safe to say 100 spaces because we want trees and we want it to have shade and we want it to not be I could find the slide, but the wasteland of parking that it's just an old school commercial parking lot, right? And that's just what it is. But we really think the challenge here is to not make it seem uninviting, even though there's commercial buildings on either side.
Yeah, so, yeah, I agree with that. I like the idea that you would want to have trees in there. I think across some of the different, between the renders and the diagrams, it's not always, kind of clear what the thought is there. But that's great to hear, because you're right, the current parking lot, and not just yours, like the
Right.
entire area is a parking lot wasteland. So it's great to hear that you'd have trees and make it inviting and connecting. What is your thought about the comment that was made in the Downtown Development Authority letter about the trail connection and creating that connection between the two sides of the site?
Yeah, no, we've had really productive discussions with the DDA. I went to their board meeting twice, and we've had some additional meetings, and there's meetings at the city that Hillary brought consultants to. They've been pretty amazing on the process. The trail kind of belonging on Cherokee is, in terms of the DDA letter, they're asking that our building that might be a hotel or might be multifamily leave room for an expanded sidewalk and a shared use path. Cherokee is not a standard width roadway, as I understand it. So they've tried to figure out what's the shared use path that they can get it fit in there and still have it serve cars too. And we're saying that that's fine. Like, we can work with that.
Is it Kimco's preference to have multifamily and a hotel, or all multifamily, or that's being left open to decide later?
Well, I think I'll answer that this way. I think on this site and at the city center design charrettes that we went to, just the need for a hotel was talked about a lot. Kimco doesn't operate hotels, so that would be finding a hotel user who believes in the site, right? But whether it's for the wellness district or for just a hole in the service area, right? So it's Kimco's preference to try to find the right thing for the site. It would be better for Kimco if it was all residential, but I really think a hotel would be a great use for the site and would help all of the adjacencies that I just talked about.
Quick question about the footprint.
Michelle's
Oh,
next.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I noticed in some of the comments from the neighbors that they were talking about, they wanted to see some retail in the project, and I didn't really see an answer from you folks, so could you?
As it stands, I talked about timing. We're not in a rush. We're going to start looking for a JV partner if we can get a successful rezone. The shopping center will still be there. We're not trying to set a land speed record for a permit or a demo permit. So there's some time, right, at first. Second, I think that's the challenge, right? And I live within walking distance of a coffee shop. I like that. And it's also, it's the site itself is right next to Walmart, and it's right next to other grocery stores, and it's hard to find, it's been hard for us to find something, an anchor that really worked. I had a gym tenant that seemed great. They wanted to dig a pool. I can't dig a pool.
Right.
I can't touch that. I understand why the neighborhood would say it's nice to walk to some retail. I totally get it. I just think for us looking long term, it was kind of about where is the site trending towards and what would be the highest and best use and what is the right time.
Well, and that might be something that if the hotel comes down the road, there might be some opportunities for it there.
There was one unique thing with the TSA that this block was really just multifamily, which was interesting too. The rest of it was mixed use type, but
Right.
so just something to consider too. Go ahead, Michelle.
And then, can I ask a quick question about your financing? Do you have financing in place? It's a somewhat challenging market for financing.
I mean,
Could
we
you
haven't.
expound on that a little bit, please?
Sure, and that's it. Financing is always about timing, right? But we are not looking for financing right now because I'm trying to get something in place, and then we would look for a JV partner. Typically, part of the reason we look for a JV partner is to share the financial burden side of things. So there's some split there, percentage-wise, of the capital costs, and then there's same split on the other side of the return. So we have not gone out for financing, and I'm not looking to do that in the next 6 months.
Well, as you know, of course, with such a challenging site, sometimes the people that would provide financing might be inclined to increase the density and things like that. Have you run into that recently?
Well, I have found on some JV partnerships that they're very sensitive to the unit mix. They have their own ideas about the right unit mix, but I really haven't seen someone say, "Gosh, I wish this was,
More units.
twice the project it was." I mean, I guess that's always possible.
Right. Yeah. Thanks.
Aaron, and then David.
Yeah, along that same topic, I'm just curious to know about some other, well, first off, Kimco's model in some of these conversions or redevelopments. Long-term ownership, fee developer, like what does that look like long-term? And then what sort of arrangements have worked really well in other places and what type of product?
Okay, that's a complicated question. In general, what Kimco likes to do, and I think in my intro I said they've been doing this for about 10 years, so it's not like they have 50 years of experience. But what they've done is find a JV partner and have a buyout clause. So after stabilization, Kimco can buy out the JV partner. That is what they've done in Washington, D.C. We have a center called the Pentagon Center, which is right on the metro. It's right next to what was going to be the Google headquarters they didn't build. And you can look across the Potomac at the Washington Monument. That's one that is reaching stabilization, and we're looking at buying out our JV partner. Projects in Florida. We have not done one in Colorado. We are looking at the very similar deal structure in Daly City, which is the Bay Area in San Francisco, and another one in Fremont that I'm working on, where it would be a similar deal structure in terms of finding a JV partner and the idea being reach a stabilization, and some period after that, Kimco buys out the JV partner. It has worked. It has worked well. The goal 10 years ago was to have 20,000 units under management and operation, and we're about halfway there.
And then just kind of products in that portfolio, like, I mean, does it lean more luxury? Does it lean more workforce? Like what does that look like?
I would say it is at the middle to top of market, not setting the bar at a higher level. Kimco is pretty conservative, so they don't want lower end quality stuff. They also they're a REIT. They want to own for a long time. So I would say middle to the high end of the market, if that helps.
Thanks, sir. David?
I'm curious about the footprint of the potential hotel. It looks like it's extending over portions of what's landscaped as a sort of a plaza in the northeast corner, but it feels like that footprint sort of changes that corner of the site to be sort of, neglected compared to the northwest. Is there any thoughts on opening that up more so you get a similar, crossing through the site in both directions? It feels like if that was built out, that northeast corner is going to be a little in shadow, and I believe there was some other drawing that showed that as the proposed lobby location, realizing that the hotel's not designed, but doesn't seem to allow for porte-cochere or something to drop off front of hotel, that type of thing.
That's true, and that was a earlier drawing. I mean, I think the lobby really needs to face the parking lot, and you pull. I mean, that's kind of how a hotel would probably work, and the service would be on maybe the other side. I think it's a fair point. I really think no building there makes it look, it's just way too open. I think a hotel can fit. I think that our challenge was to show a footprint that seems fair for a hotel, to leave a space for a final site plan to come in. I mean, you have a good point in terms of you don't want that to feel crowded or feel shadowed. I'm happy to get the landscape architect up here to talk a little in more detail, but I think the footprint we tried for was probably on the conservative side, and we can take your point to heart on the design development process.
I've got a related question to that, David, if you're good. How were the open space landscaping requirements calculated? Are they without the hotel pad? Are they with that? Because it does look like it kind of overlaps some of those areas, and can maybe clarify when are we meeting criteria for the landscaping requirements, and does it impact it when we have the hotel added?
Yeah, so there are a few
I'm
landscape
sorry,
requirements.
could you,
Sorry,
excuse me, could you state your name?
Yes,
and
Patrick.
who you're with?
Yep, Patrick Hannon, Norris Design, Principal Landscape Architect. So there are a few landscape requirements that we have to meet. There's the street perimeter, so that's a defined number of street trees around the perimeter. And then it is based on there's a calculation of number of trees and shrubs per square foot of overall landscape area, and that is calculated assuming the footprint of the hotel. The footprint of the hotel is subtracted from that total area, that total site area. So it is considering the potential future development in that zone. So that exact number might change a little bit. But it is a ratio of trees and shrubs per square footage of open space that we would hit.
Okay. And it feels just from, an initial glance that there's a good amount of open space. I guess one of the items that was discussed earlier was access for the public, and will that all be accessible to the public, or will there be, is it intended to have certain areas kind of blocked off for private resident use or anything like that?
So the parking garage would not be open to the public, meaning you would need access to it, and that's just to make sure no one gets confused. In terms of the rest of the site, there's no plan to have it fenced off without the ability to walk through it. In terms of accessing north to south, on a pedestrian side, on the bike side, I think that makes sense. We weren't trying to build fences and close it in.
The renderings do look very nice of it being open and accessible, and it's, I always want to make sure that's the intent as we're moving forward. Any other questions? I did have two more quick items. You could clarify. I've always had questions.
I don't mind. I don't like keeping coming.
The traffic study noted that the commercial, if it was fully developed or fully occupied, would actually have a higher traffic count than the proposed residential, and I don't know, that feels odd to me, and maybe you could just explain it for a non-traffic person. Yeah.
I'm a planner, but I'm not a traffic engineer, so if we get in the weeds, I'm going to ask the engineer to come up. So there's two things to look at there, and I think if you're talking common sense, I think what I'm about to say may answer your question. On a total daily trips, and this is from the traffic manual that looks at shopping centers, right? Like they don't count each shopping center, they look at the average shopping center. Walmart probably is higher than what I'm about to say. And some are lower. The total daily trips, it's a reduction with our proposal. And our proposal, you have to look at it as the most intense version of multifamily and hotel, or multifamily and more multifamily. The AM and PM peak hour trips, it's also worth looking at in that table. One of those is higher on the residential side, and that makes sense. Like people leave in, I think it was AM. I don't have the table in front of me, but if you look at those, it may help alleviate the head scratch moment, like how is it less? On the total daily trips, it's less. On the AM and PM, there's one of those that's slightly more. It's actually not a lot more. But I think you should look at both. Does that help? And if not, I'll get the engineer up here because I don't think I can go deeper than that.
Yeah, I think it explains it, like you said. I think as you're thinking about people leaving for work, that those trips are going to be concentrated in small areas, and so like that does make sense as opposed to being more spread out all day for more of a commercial. And I guess maybe just to confirm though, when you're talking about full occupancy, you're talking about the existing building, so nothing added or no other build out. Okay. And then secondary question list that sparked anything from anyone? Okay. The drainage analysis then did note that there was no offsite analysis done or no consideration. We do have this large easement going through, which is Little Dry Creek, which, while I understand it is an impediment in some ways, I think it's also an opportunity, right? And personally, I appreciate that you have worked with city and with the Development Authority to try to figure out, what might be a future condition here, and how do we make sure that we don't block anything from happening in the future. So I appreciate that, but I guess just maybe in the drainage report, it probably should make a mention of the fact that we have Little Dry Creek coming through here, and what are the impacts of that, and the opportunities and challenges associated with it.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Do you want us to comment on that?
If there's any comment on why it wasn't included, that would be great. Other than that, I think I made my point. But.
Good evening. Rachel Patton with Harris Coker Smith.
Thank you.
I won't speak to why it wasn't included, but I will say that we recently found out that Mile High is doing a big study of Little Dry Creek. And so we will continue working with Mile High as the site plan and as this application continues to progress to make sure we're incorporating and working with Mile High and doing what we need to do. Yeah.
And I appreciate it. I figured you guys were aware of it. Like I said, I haven't been involved with that, and want to make sure that's clear. I'm not, but I just understand that there is a reality. We have Little Dry Creek, and it's.
And our intent is to not exasperate it and not make it worse, but also, we can't piecemeal it and just improve it on that little stretch of our box culvert, and that's it, right?
It's not this project's responsibility to fix
The whole thing,
the sins of
yeah.
our past of putting this straight through the property.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate it and understand that. Thank you. Any other questions on that? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, discussion that we want to bring up?
Chair,
Okay.
do you want to check in with our
Oh, yeah, I've
online
been actually
commissioner?
thought about that. Stephen, anything that you have?
No, thank you. I've been listening to all the comments.
Appreciate you being there. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to public testimony. I do have one individual who had requested an opportunity to speak regarding this case. Just as a note, all those comments from the public should be directed to the commission. There's a 3-minute time limit on speakers, other than staff and applicant, if there's any follow-up questions. We will go through just the sign-up sheet, and then if you can say your name, address for the record, and then we can go from there. So I've got Sam Koenig. You want to come up? So if you state your name and address, and then you have 3 minutes, and will we have the timer going there? Nancy, thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. My name's Sam Koenig. I live at 1812 East Girard Place, Inglewood, Colorado, 80113. I'm speaking in favor of the development. I think this is a great location right between Broadway and Inglewood Station. It's ideal for creating a more vibrant community. Right next to a grocery store, walking distance to Broadway, walking distance to the train station. Right along the 12 bus, goes right through there along Downing. Burt Trolley, right there. Burt Trolley has new signs. They're also great, so people will be able to find it a lot better. It's also great for people who worked in the medical district. This is the type of apartment that'd be great for a family like mine. My wife works at the hospital. We chose to live just east of the hospital. We were able to sell a car. We're now a car light household. We have one car, able to save a few $1,000s a year. More options for people who work near this hospital and other places of employment are great opportunities for people like me and my family. We have our first child on the way. We want more options near the hospital. We'd love to stay, not get priced out of this area. More options, better pricing. And then last thing, we discussed earlier, just south of the property, there's just 2 large parking lots. I visited them today on the way here, 5:45 p.m. All 126 spaces were empty. Just want a general comment. What's the city's plan for these adjacent lots? What would the developer do differently if this space was included in the project? I know there's some concern about underbuilding parking. My personal concern is about overbuilding parking. If you go to that area, there's an abundance of parking that's not being used, while storefronts remain vacant in some of these core areas. This area was overbuilt with parking a few decades ago, and I don't want us to make those same mistakes again. So again, I support the redevelopment, and I'm excited for what comes next. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else that would like to speak regarding this application? Okay.
Can we check in with we may have somebody online.
Public online, are you asking, correct?
Mm-hmm. Let me check.
Is there any public online? I'm not sure.
So Ms. Portal, did you wish to address the commission? She's got to unmute.
I guess I would just reiterate what our conditional letter of support from our board of directors emphasized about this project. We are very supportive of the opportunity to turn around a very large parcel that could easily fall into neglect and attract nuisance activity to the area and replace it with new economic activity, tax revenue, market rate housing options, a possible hotel with meeting space, and related customer and visitor spending on daily goods and services just a couple of blocks away on the Broadway corridor where that kind of spending is needed. At the same time, we are mindful of our responsibility to advance the
biggest NFL game he's played in, 1st and 10.
High-density mixed-use transit village in the city center sub-area. We've asked that the plan incorporate middle-income workforce housing if that is something that City Council adopts as part of the Affordable Housing Task Force recommendations. We would also request that up to 10% of the units meet Type A, which is fully accessible ADA standards, to meet the needs of the many people in our community living with disabilities, which is about 14% of residents, and local seniors who desire to age in place. We've also asked that the east frontage of the site plan offer a landscape buffer to support the planned Little Dry Creek Greenway project, which will be an important amenity in the area and link to the regional trail system in the metro area. And that we've asked that architectural design be held to applicable TSA overlay design guidelines. We appreciate working with this development team. They've been responsive to our input, and they have agreed to work with us on these conditions. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, Ms. Portel, could you state your name for the record and your position that you hold?
Yes, Hillary Portel, and I'm the Executive Director of the Inglewood Downtown Development Authority.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay. At this point, we do have an opportunity for a final statement or rebuttal by the applicant or by staff, if you'd like.
If I might, I just want to address a little bit of what the last speaker mentioned. In terms of the workforce housing or whatever the task force recommendations are, that's covered by condition 1. We're fully amenable to that. The 10% unit type A fully accessible, I believe their letter said 5%, so this is the first time we're hearing that. It's not that we wouldn't do that. I think that's just more of a site development plan issue than a rezoning issue. I think those are the two big ones. And and that we do meet the TSA architectural design standards. I think that was everything. Is there anything else you wanted to?
Just one thing.
Sure.
And yeah, to be fair, I remember an earlier conversation that talked about 10% of the ground floor units. I think it ends up in the same number. We just said 5%, and their letter does say 5% of all the units. And I think code is 2%, but it's a lot more than that, but we're on board with that.
There were a few additional items that she had noted, including the Greenway. Are you saying those are not being commitments that you're adding, or just to make sure I'm understanding?
If the commission wants to make those a condition, I would be in support of that. I don't know if we need to work out the language or if you need to say applicant agrees to, and then as long as it's the 5% ADA units, I'm fine with that condition too. And in terms of the Greenway, yeah, the wording in the DDA letter is fine with us. If we need to work out a condition between now and City Council, I'm fine with that too.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we can call for a motion to close the hearing. And then we can have our follow-up discussion.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Montiel?
Yes.
Mr. Ruddle?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Mr. Renson?
Yes.
Mr. Kaplan?
Aye.
And Chair Haggerty?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay. So we can now have a discussion amongst commission members, and anybody have any topics they want to bring up to start?
Can I clarify with the
Please.
city attorney? Do we need to have a motion on the table for them to start discussion?
Generally, we would close the public hearing and
Yeah.
then have a discussion for that, yes.
Before the motion. Okay, thank you.
Move to close the public hearing.
That's what we just said.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I guess we could call for, I'm sorry, I think what you were asking is we call for a motion to, and then we can have our discussion after that. Motion to, on the case recommendation.
Let me just confirm with Brian
Thanks.
Allison to see what the normal practice is. So Mr. Isom informs me that generally you would follow the same procedure as City Council. City Council now has adopted Bob's Rules of Order, the newest version, which would allow you to have a discussion without a motion on the table.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, with that, Michelle?
Yes, thank you. I really like this project. I like your sensitivity to the neighborhood to the north. I think it's a very good transition from basically Walmart over there to have this residential project and potentially a hotel, which is something we've been talking about for quite some time, that Inglewood would really like to have, especially in that district. It's close to the light rail and other transit. And also your sensitivity to the miniature river that's flowing underneath the property. It's a creek, okay. And I think it's very wise of you to leave that whole channel open because who knows what's going to end up happening with that, 100-year floods, who knows when that's really going to happen. It's not every 100 years, it's whenever it happens. So I think that you have been, like I said, very sensitive to the neighborhood and to Inglewood's needs, and I'm going to be voting yes on this project.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, it looks great. This is a great activation of this space. Two concerns I have are not quite hitting the density for the location and proximity to the train station. And then also just a very specific consideration about the ECE provider. I mean, these are in short supply throughout Denver Metro. And so
Can you clarify ECE for those
early
of us?
childhood education in the Montessori school. I would love to see some specific consideration for keeping them in the neighborhood, whether a part of the development or something, relocation or inclusion. Certainly would want to see that as a permitted use added to the PUD. And yeah, something let's make an effort here to keep them in the neighborhood.
I have that note as adding that as an allowable use to this application for the PUD to mitigate that, and I thought that was a great idea, so.
Yeah, and I think further, just what can we do to include them and to keep them in the neighborhood? They have a waiting list. There's a lot of demand. Adding families, especially with 3-bedroom units, you're going to see even more demand for ECE.
Can we get clarification on it? Like, is that allowed at this? If we approve the PUD application as it stands, are they allowed between now and council to put different allowable uses in there?
They generally wouldn't be able to change their request, but they could ask council if council would change their request to add that, if they're trying to add that specific land use in. But you can always make that recommendation. If you want to recommend putting that land use back in, you can do that now.
Okay, that's helpful.
So in our approval or denial, we could add the condition that we would request that land use be added and any of the other things, the following of the TSA design standards, the other requirements from the Downtown Development Authority. So I think those are things that we can include.
So we'd be making a recommendation to City Council to include it. Is that what you're saying?
That's what we could do, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. No, yeah.
Yeah, so I like a lot of things about this development. I think, the site from where it stands right now has nowhere to go but up. And this is great for the neighborhood. I completely understand the desire to focus on residential. I think, you look at that area and already there's a lot of vacant retail. So including additional retail to me doesn't seem to, to really be necessary to hit what this district needs. I think adding more people will then help to, create some more vibrancy and revitalize some of the retail that's already there. So I think there's a ton of opportunity. I'm strongly in favor of including all of the conditions that were proposed by the DDA. I think, in particular, making sure that the eventual plan does include the trail connection piece is really important. One concern that I have, and this came up earlier with my question, is just around the parking lot and the trees. And I know that there's a lot of like refinement still to happen, but just going like page by page in the application, it's like one of the pictures looks like it has, planters and trees throughout the parking lot. Another one has it around the edges. Other ones look like it has a driveway that goes all the way around and the parking lot in the middle. Like, those are all very different as far as the appearance from the streets and, the inviting nature and whether it, creates that connection through the property that, we're trying to get here. I think, the inclusion of the green space as it stands is great. I'm a little concerned about it being like on the north side of a 5-story building where it's going to be in shade for a significant part of the year, and that being the green space and then the parking lot being on the south side. Like, I think there's lots of questions I have about kind of what that final design is going to look like. And so I just really want to make sure that, we're kind of on the record about, I would second what Mr. Koenig said in his comment about my concern is overbuilding parking. That area is full of parking. We know there's the parking right next to the site that doesn't appear to be going anywhere. And, it's the overbuilding of parking that has really changed the character of that area, in my view, for the negative. So I think, adding this density is great. I agree with Mr. Martinez, and I would love to see additional density. But overall, I think this is a great direction for the site.
Yeah, and I think we can assume that they're going to meet the minimum standards. I don't know that we can require more than that, but I think, noting these items, I think are important. I don't know that we'll be able to require additional landscaping other than what would be proposed in those tables that they provided. So unless we, of course, request that at this point. So as much as I'd love to think that this is all going to happen in the future too, I think we have to be cognizant that, unless it's a requirement, it may not. I'm not trying to say that this won't happen, but just the reality of a site.
So part of the reason I asked my question about parking minimums and how that may have influenced the design is that we have the new state law, which is going to change as of July 1st of this year, I think. So like when this gets approved, it's right at the tail end of when we are allowed to include parking minimums without the additional requirements that are in that bill. I suppose was just, asking from the perspective of looking ahead to where that's going, would we want to, sort of, I guess, preemptively move in that direction? And it wasn't still totally clear to me, whether that regulation would change the design outcomes. But I think at least I would like us to see, let the market decide how much the right amount of parking is and not impose those minimums. But I know we're not quite there from the state law perspective, but I think that, was where my concern was coming from.
Thanks. Thoughts?
I think I'll second what you said, Noah, about the questions about the planting within the parking. I was wondering if there'd be ways to bank some of those pieces together to actually create something usable. I don't love the idea of so many small islands with a tree surrounded by grass. It seems like a lot of wasted irrigation. It's not used by anyone except for someone to take a nap or a dog to go to the bathroom. So I'd love to see some of those square footages combined so that it could potentially be useful for something to someone. I'm not a landscape designer, so I don't have the best solution right now, but would love to see some more thought put into how to refine that center parking island, because I think right now the giant sea of parking is kind of visual blight to what is otherwise a project that I think has a lot of benefits. So I think there's pieces that can be refined that I'm sure the design team will be looking at over the coming months. But yeah, I would just say every piece matters, and so let's try to make sure that one bad piece of a large site doesn't wreck the whole site, because it can happen.
And Mr. Ashman, when we are approving this PUD, there are landscape plans, there are plans associated with that. Are they required to meet those plans, or are they required to meet the table of the minimums, just to maybe clarify? Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, so there's the kind of the words, and then there's the plans. The words are the things that precede the plans. So anything that's said in the words are the things that they would have to meet first. So any sort of, delinquencies to that would need to be addressed in the building permits. The overall kind of structure of the site, though, would need to be similar to what's in those plans. Thanks.
And Chair, Brian Isom, Planning Manager. There are minor adjustments that can be made without a PUD coming back to the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. I think they have them listed on their first page of their PUD documentation. And then there's a specific list, a very specific list that says, if you do this, you have to go back to the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. So I would think in the interest on their side, they probably don't want to cross into that threshold. So they would work within the minor amendments to adjust anything that they need to.
Thank you. I think just the question, though, is even if they show more landscaping in the plan itself, the requirement would be whatever the tables are and what the words are. Okay. I hope those match. Other questions, thoughts?
I have to correct something I said. Sorry, I see that it's planting bed, not grass around most of those trees, so my apologies, but still combining it would be awesome to get some bigger, more usable spaces.
Chair, just a reminder, Mr. Ruddle, if you want to check with him.
Yep. Stephen, are any thoughts that you have?
No, I second everybody's opinion and also want to support the idea of the ECE being considered as well, because I agree that we need to keep that in the neighborhood, especially with families coming in and having small kids and so forth. There's going to be a real need for that.
Great, thank you. Obviously, we'll have a vote. We can call for that. It sounds like we're leaning towards a recommendation of approval with some additional conditions. The conditions from community development, which were the project meet all the affordable housing requirements at the time of building permit submittal, which could be additional. Applicants entered a development agreement for the purpose of planning and constructing offsite traffic improvements, split payment for the fee in lieu for the park and open space. And then we've had some additional allowable use of daycare, following the TSA overall design guideline standards. The inclusion of Little Dry Creek Trail Corridor on Cherokee. Am I missing any that anybody has thought of or seen? Okay. Any additional thoughts on those? Okay, I guess with that, we can make a motion and a case on the case.
Chair, do you want me to make a motion to recommend to City Council for the approval of this PUD case ZON 2024-002 with the recommendations as you just stated?
Yeah, I think that
Does
would.
that work, Nancy?
Do we need to repeat them?
We do need to make one clarification. I think in like the second item, you mentioned a development agreement, and that was not included in our staff conditions.
I think you meant the Hillary Portel's group, the DD?
On page
Downtown
10 of our application, it says community development recommendations is enter into development agreement.
Yeah,
And
so,
the- oh, go ahead, Will.
to clarify on that, that was one of the portions that was adjusted in that, lengthy condition at the bottom. So rather than doing a development agreement, each of those, line items specifies a timeline for where they would have to meet those criteria. So in lieu of doing a development agreement, that's intended to be the kind of the same triggers.
Can you clarify where that is located?
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's
Shelley.
in the separate document conditions that were provided. Yep, that one. So the lengthy number 2 is the portion that originally was mentioned as a development agreement, but this satisfies the same goal.
This replaces the recommendations that were in our packet, so these would be the
Correct.
community development recommendations, which
Yep.
are the affordable housing compliance, the off-site traffic improvements, for, that they will be performed, the multimodal fee contribution, ADA pedestrian improvements, and impact fees and open space fees.
Correct. And then if I could make one more clarification
please.
just for staff benefit, on the EDDA one, there was one piece that the applicant had requested to remove from that letter as far as the design review board. So if you could just, specify which way on that one you guys are planning on that condition. So those are my only 2 thoughts, though. Thanks.
Don't, can you clarify again?
Yeah, what was that?
What that is?
Yeah, let me grab my laptop real quick.
And then you were talking really fast. Did you include all of the EDDA stuff? The Inglewood did?
So in the applicant response letter, there's recommendation number 4, which reads, future buildings on site should be held to applicable TSA overlay specific plan design guidelines with review by the TSA Design Guidelines Committee to ensure that massing, character, and composition of exterior building elements are consistent with the vision of the area. And so the applicant in their response letter to the EDDA had requested the Design Guideline Committee portion be removed from that. So, and that should be in your packet as well.
Can you clarify what that would mean? They would still have to follow the TSA overlay, but
Still-
the design, what's the review?
Yeah, so it would be, staff reviewing that.
Staff review
that
as
TSA
opposed to
plan.
EDDA.
Well, rather than going to that TSA Design Guideline Committee.
Okay, did staff have a thought on that?
We
And
don't,
staff.
because it's not required in code. So
Okay.
anything that's not required in code, there's a section in the staff report where we tell you there's certain recommendations that the EDDA has made that we really can't weigh in on because they're not a code requirement in Title 16. So that's one that we really can't weigh in on because it's not a Title 16 requirement.
Can we get a comment from you on that? So
No, sorry, we
looking
can't.
at the letter,
Thank
it
you, no.
says, oh, we can't do that?
We can't get a comment from them. Yeah, we closed it. Should have been asked beforehand. That's okay. I think, no, what was your question going to be?
Oh, I was just looking at the letter here and was gonna add, so what they said in the letter is that the PUD narrative already adopts the overlay plan design guidelines, except for a few specific elements which are already outlined. So it sounds like, and I can't speak for the applicant, but the way that I understand that is that they're saying, we've already said we're gonna comply with most of it. We've said there's a couple specific things we're not gonna comply with, and those are already included, and that's part of the approval. And so then going back before this design committee would, I guess be somewhat redundant or, would potentially ask them to, change things later that had already been approved. So that's, again, I can't speak for them, but that's my understanding.
And this is on page 1145 of the application, if you were interested in reading. Okay, so we have no issues providing proposed elevations to the committee for comment. I think is in there as well, so I think.
So I would say that our motion to approve should include the EDDA recommendations except for number 4.
With a modified number 4. I think would make more sense, because I think it would still go to the TSA. I think it's just not necessarily to the guideline committee. So
I think the issue is, it says, future buildings on this site should be held to the applicable standards. And they're saying, except for where we've already said, we're doing something that is different from that. And I think to me, it'd be hard for us to do that modification. So I would suggest we just take that out.
you're saying get rid of the whole requirement, because they're gonna have to follow it anyways, so. They're gonna have to follow the TSA.
They're going to have to follow
yes.
what they have already proposed in their narrative, which is mostly in compliance with the TSA guidelines.
I
according
would
to
agree with that. Okay, so do we need a new motion at this point to clarify where we have gone here? Nancy, are you able to?
Just so I'm clear.
We might not be done yet, so hold that thought. On item 2G, on the staff recommendations, what they've indicated is they are not sure if they own that specific sidewalk. So if they do not own that sidewalk, they would request that they not have to build that 8-foot, because they can't build a sidewalk on somebody else's property without that person's permission. And if they don't give them permission, there's kind of a question on the ownership of that whole area.
Can we say like we would recommend that get built so that it's still in there in case we can come between now and a later time, come to an agreement on that?
It's already recommended to get constructed with the recommendation. But if they don't own, or if the entire 8-foot might go onto that neighboring property, I think their concern is that the neighbor may say no, and then their entire project is held up because they can't build 2-foot of sidewalk on somebody else's property.
And I don't think there should be a requirement that they put one on their property. It would make no sense to have it there, so.
I
would
think
agree
that's
with
their
that.
concern, is that they would be held up for that.
Could we potentially include something in the form of like a fee in lieu again? Like if they're not actually able to do the construction, that they contribute to a neighboring project that pursues the same goals?
You're talking about just for that sidewalk?
Yes.
I would be against that. I mean, they don't even own the property, so that property, we're talking about the sidewalk, so.
And this is specifically the south side where that existing parking lot is. That needs to evolve anyway.
Yeah, that hopefully becomes an opportunity in the future. I like the idea, but I think.
No, I wasn't saying that they should pay. I was just saying if after best efforts, they can't do that, rather than just having it go away, having an alternate option.
I feel like if we can't help them figure out how to get it done, it shouldn't be their responsibility at that point to fix it. Because again, I think that area needs to have some additional.
And I think that needs to be addressed when that specific property comes up for redevelopment.
Okay, so with that, striking 2G from.
The applicant's request was to include best efforts there. So that is
best
how I
effort
would
on
modify
2G.
it.
Okay. It's fair. And then Nancy, did you have additional?
If I can just clarify.
Please.
So it's motion to recommend approval to city council with the following conditions: the community development recommendations, and then we're going to tweak some language in 2G. Would you like to tweak that language
We
now?
would like to.
Or have staff tweak it?
We would like to have staff tweak it, because that would be a much better idea.
Okay, and then the EDDA recommendations minus number 4. And then I just need clarification on the added permitted use. Is it just daycare, or is it daycare and preschool?
Yeah, whatever the current permitted uses that would allow early childhood education.
Title 16 would call it
daycare, just-
dependent care.
Yeah, dependent care, sure, yes.
Okay, so dependent care. And then I have follow TSA design guidelines.
Yeah, although in hindsight, that's actually included in the DDA request.
Okay, so we don't
request.
need that as a separate, and then I thought, Chair, you had something about the flood, something.
I did request that the offsite analysis be included in their report.
Okay. Thank you.
So with that, I think we can vote.
Is there a second?
Oh, good point. We need a second. Thank you, Michelle.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Montiel?
Aye.
Mr. Ruddle?
Aye.
Mr. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Renson?
Yes.
Mr. Kaplan?
Aye.
And Chair Haggerty?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Motion passes. Then thank you everyone for coming. We appreciate everyone's time and effort from both the developer and from our team has been great. So I really appreciate that. This will go to City Council then from here. And so we'll look forward to seeing you all again. And we have a couple more just housekeeping items, but thank you everyone here who was here for the public hearing. Yeah, appreciate everyone's assistance here. Okay, with that, we can go on to the last couple items. Staff's choice. Anything on your end? Yeah.
Brian? Do you
Staff's
have
choice?
anything?
Yeah.
I don't have anything.
Thanks, Brian. Attorney's choice, Tamara?
No, I don't have anything, but thank you for allowing me to fill in tonight.
Appreciate you being back here.
I might have been wrong. I think we have an open house scheduled for January 22nd.
Yes, it's a Wednesday night due to the Martin Luther King holiday. We get moved a night over.
Okay, so that'll be here again in the community center?
It'll be in the community room, just like I think it's that way now.
Sure.
Community room, and then we'll have the P&Z meeting after.
And I just state for the record, it'll be posted as a special meeting, but just like last time, the town hall went from 5 to 7. Your normal time usually is 6:30 for your meeting. Your meeting will start at 7, okay?
Okay. I won't be able to attend that meeting. I need to be, and I will not be able to attend, yeah.
And that one is for the second, I think it's the second of our meetings on the comprehensive plan supplement. This one will focus on the kind of land use maps that are included, future land use maps that are included within the comprehensive plan and how we're changing how we organize those based on, originally were developed around park-centric maps, and now they're going to go to the neighborhood map that was approved by the city council within the last year or two.
Thank you. Maybe just a clarification, I can join virtually for the council meeting, or not for the council meeting, I'm sorry, for the commission meeting. Would I still run that as chair, or would that be run by Brenda because she would be here?
I'm going to defer that to Tamara, how that works. That's a good question.
Yes, council policies, which they've adopted to now apply to boards and commissions, state that the chair should be in person.
Perfect.
So you would just be an attendee that night.
That works great, thank you for the clarification. Okay, Commissioner's choice, go down the line. David? Nope. Michelle?
I have nothing except for perhaps Nancy or somebody can tell me. The meeting with the city manager on the 15th, I believe, is that going to, with boards and commissions? Okay.
Sorry, I can look into that. That's the first I've heard it. You think it's January 15th?
Yeah, I believe so, and I was curious, I can't attend on that day, and so I was hoping that I could maybe Zoom.
Okay, I'll follow up
Yeah, invitation from Sean Lewis, January 15th, 2025, 5:30 meeting. So it's actually, never mind, it's a Microsoft Teams meeting, so I guess it's going to be on Zoom, so never mind. Thank you.
So is it to all the commissioners, or?
Yeah, it's city manager briefing with board and commission
okay.
members. and neighborhood group leaders on Wednesday, January 15th. You weren't invited.
Yay.
Am I the only one that got this?
No, I got it. I think it's one of his project updates. like
Okay,
going
yeah,
through the-
yeah, so, okay. I didn't get read the whole thing about Microsoft Teams, so obviously it's gonna be Zoom, so.
So Michelle, is there something I can follow up with?
No,
or
I wanted to see if I could join by Zoom, but it's a
Oh,
Microsoft
okay.
Teams meeting, so.
Perfect. All right,
The answer
thank
is
you.
yes, so I take my question back, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Otherwise, I have nothing.
But thank you for the reminder, Michelle, for some of us who may not have seen it when it first came through. Aaron?
Yeah, thanks staff for a thorough PUD application packet. I just request that maybe in the future, like the full traffic studies be in like an addendum or something. It was like, my computer was smoking when I tried to download that thing, so.
Don't put some stuff that we need to read after the traffic.
Exactly, yeah, exactly, yeah. So thank you, but thank you, it was great.
All those X's and everything are just, bingo game.
Eric?
It's like a Walgreens receipt in there.
I don't have anything else. Thank you.
No.
I'm good.
Okay. I iterate. Thank you, staff, for the reporting, and Happy New Year, everyone. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.